Oh my fucking god. I'm looking at the notes I've made for this episode and there's 8 fucking pages. Apparently I have a lot to say today. Today we're going to be talking about attachment theory, the attachment styles. Attachment theory has become quite a popular point of interest in psychology and psychology about relationships and love, and I feel like it's become quite like a pop psychology term where, I don't know, everyone kind of, is doing their attachment style quiz and working out what they are the same way like people do with love languages. So I thought I would give my 2 cents on them as well, share my kind of take on them and how I feel like I've benefited from having an understanding of attachment theory. I'm obviously not a psychologist, so this is very much from what I've learned and my experience with it. But yeah, I just thought I'd share a few ways that I've found having a basic understanding of what attachment theory is and how it affects how people are in relationships, how it's benefited me in relationships, and also kind of touch on a couple ways that I feel like I've seen it do a little bit of damage, because I do feel like there are a couple things surrounding attachment styles that maybe does a little bit of harm. We'll get into it. Firstly, I'll go over what they are, what attachment styles are, from my understanding. Again, not a psychologist, very interested in psychology, feel like I know a decent amount. It's something I'm very interested in, but I'm not a fucking psychologist. If you want facts, go to a therapist, not me. Although one day I would quite like to be a therapist. I debate it quite often. An attachment style will essentially describe how an individual will behave, attach, interact with people close to them in their lives. For example, it will affect things like how comfortable you are with emotional intimacy. It'll affect how healthily you can deal with having space in your relationship. It'll affect how anxious you get in relationships. It basically, to sum up, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, it will make more sense when I start actually talking about it and stop describing it. It's like, when you're playing a game and someone's telling you the rules and you're like, I just need to fucking start playing. Like, this is not going into my brain. But I would say it would basically describe what triggers you in a relationship, because everyone has certain things that kind of freak them out about relationships, or that kind of, I don't know, something that maybe is a little bit dysfunctional. I feel like everyone's got something, and I think attachment styles are obviously one area. There's relationships and there's a million factors, but attachment styles I feel like are one kind of part of working out how you interact and attach to people that are close to you and what will trigger you the most. Hence why I feel like having a basic understanding of attachment styles is useful, because I feel like it gives you some answers in a way, help you understand why you act the way you do in relationships, maybe a bit of where it's coming from, and then obviously when you have an awareness of things, it opens the door to being able to change it. But when it's still kind of in your subconscious, you can't really begin to work through it and get to like a healthier place. You're kind of just being like controlled by things you don't really even know are there. So I feel like it's just bringing something to the surface, really. Like, maybe in relationships you have a tendency to be really clingy, or you're quite like a commitment phobe. Things like that, they can be quite frustrating, because no one wants to be someone that feels like they're really clingy. No one enjoys feeling scared of commitment. No one likes these things. It's just kind of things that we've gained from like our childhood and past relationships or traumas and things. No one wants to be scared of commitment. No one wants to be a really commitment phobic kind of person, or someone that struggles to say what they want in relationships. And I think that to me is one reason that understanding attachment theory is beneficial, because it lets you kind of understand and be compassionate towards yourself and also your partner about why you might act certain ways, and start to work out why you function the way you do in relationships. The main way to know what yours or someone else's attachment style is purely just by their behavior, the way they act. Once you kind of wrap your head around the 4 main attachment styles, you can spend time with someone and quite quickly work out what they default to. And I always think having that kind of gap between you and your feelings, in a sense of like, if someone's responding from a place of like anxiety because of their attachment, if you didn't have that kind of awareness, you might very quickly take that to heart and get defensive and take it very personally. Whereas I think the more information you have, like, information is power, the more you understand something, the more you can be like, that's them. I think it's quite easy sometimes to just immediately think, I've done something, like I'm causing this, blah, blah. And I think the more you learn, the more you realize nothing's fucking personal. That's something I've learned. Obviously, sometimes something's personal, but most of the time, like, people are the way they are, people react the way they react. They're triggered by certain things because of how they're wired or experiences they've had, and, you know, their love language, their attachment style. I think the more that you kind of educate yourself on things like that, the more seamless relationships can kind of be, because you can kind of read people quite easily and you don't have that like, what's going on? Why are they responding like that? You can kind of be like, I think you're anxiously attached. So there are 4 main recognized attachment styles, but I do think that it's worth saying at the start that you're not necessarily just one attachment style, and you never, you know, act in a way that contradicts that. People generally default and sway more to one, but, you know, there's a lot of factors, and like, depending on who you're with, depending on how they're acting, depending on like, I don't know, you can kind of like act in a little way of all of them, but you're going to be wired a little bit more towards a certain one. So it's not like if you're one, you could never be the other one. You know what I mean? Okay. So in no particular order, there is anxious attachment, also known as fearful attachment. This attachment tends to show up as the clingy behavior, you know, feeling discomfort when there's space maybe between you and your partner. Maybe they're not on their phone, maybe they've gone away, maybe they're busy and like doing other things, and, you know, if you're anxiously attached, you tend to think the worst. It's quite easy to spiral and think, oh my god, they're cheating on me, oh my god, they're leaving me, oh my god, they haven't answered my text for an hour, and it's probably because they've just realized that they don't want to be with me anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like the anxious, clingy, stressed kind of partner, like, often will show up kind of unnerved a lot of the time. This is typically the partner who kind of needs reassurance all the time, is kind of all over you all the time, can kind of, without meaning to, kind of suffocate their partner a bit, like texting all the time, that kind of thing. Maybe could be a bit jealous, a bit hyper-vigilant kind of person. These are kind of a lot of the more common traits with anxious attachment. I'm sure you can think of someone that, you know, someone probably springs to mind. Maybe it's an ex, maybe it's you, maybe it's just a friend that you're like, oh my god, they need to chill, you know. But it's very common, anxious attachment. This one generally comes from a place, as you could probably work out, from a place of like a fear of abandonment. Like, you're almost waiting for someone to leave you. Hence why maybe you want to text all the time and blah, blah. You kind of are almost always on edge of like, when are they going to leave me? When's this going to go wrong? When are they going to realize they don't want to be with me? Like, you know, I think this one makes quite a lot of sense. Like, you're quite all over someone because you're scared that they're going to leave you, which inevitably is actually kind of the behavior that often pushes people away. I'm not saying these are logical. Our brains often aren't fucking logical, but that's the first one, anxiously attached. Again, easy to remember because it's anxious. Like, they're all very named, like, on the nose things. Next is anxious attachment's polar opposite, the avoidantly attached, also known as dismissive. This is more the highly independent person who typically struggles to let people in, you know, contradicting the anxious. It's like, anxious attachment also, I will add, very fast paced a lot of the time, in terms of like, maybe you've been talking for a few weeks and they're like already attached and they're already like, this is my person. Avoidant, it's like you could talk for a year and they're still like, I don't really know if I feel comfortable to like tell you that I love you. Like, do you know what I mean? They're complete fucking opposites. An avoidantly attached person will feel quite, like I said, highly independent, kind of likes to think they don't need anyone, feels quite suffocated quite easily by relationships because they tend to be more comfortable by themselves because they've kind of adapted to that. And behavior wise, this could show up as kind of distant, kind of cold, they're always kind of at arm's length. You kind of have a feeling that you're never really emotionally close with them. There's always like a barrier or something there. Maybe someone avoidantly attached would prioritize hobbies and friendship and work and things like that over a romantic relationship because it feels, safer, less emotionally invasive to them. Some other kind of behaviors you might see in an avoidantly attached are like, they're kind of the type to always pick holes in everyone. Like, someone could be a great match for them and they'd be like, but like, I don't really like his tattoos, or I don't really like the way he says this word, or I don't really like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's very critical of their partner, or kind of keeps things in the talking stage, never really lets anything develop into something where they might have to have feelings, It's a spectrum though, they're all a spectrum. Like, some people are very fucking avoidant to the point where like, even like friendship can be a bit overwhelming. But you could be a bit avoidant where you're like a little bit like, like maybe you can be emotionally intimate with someone and things, but like maybe you still have a bit of fear around like fully committing. Maybe that's still quite scary to you. And again, these are all like valid, and they're all kind of neither are worse than the other. But yeah, an avoidantly attached person kind of sees relationships, I guess, as like a threat to their independence in a way, or like to their freedom. And this one generally comes from a place they all come from your fucking childhood, like what doesn't at this point? But this one tends to come from, in your childhood, maybe people let you down a lot, and you kind of, again, it makes so much sense, but like you kind of had to build up to, okay, I've learned I can't fucking rely on people because when I do, they let me down. So you become quite an independent person. And then when it comes to like relationships in your adult life, it's quite daunting because you're like the only kind of, people I've been that close to, like your parents or something, maybe they were like really fucking shit. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like there is an element of compassion towards all of these. Like, none of them are fucking ideal. You're gonna have issues whoever you date. Everyone's got something dysfunctional about them. But they're all things you can work on. But yeah, avoidant, that's that one. Avoidants have kind of learnt that it's safer to kind of shut off a little bit from other people and their emotions, and they feel safer leaning on themselves, and that's kind of it. But that's not to say that avoidantly attached people don't want relationships and don't want love and don't want emotional intimacy. They do, just as much as everyone else. They just struggle to, I guess, feel comfortable with it as much as an anxious. And an anxious is like, oh my god, I'm thriving in this, it's so intimate and it's so close, and like I just want to like talk to you all of the time, and that's kind of their dream. Whereas, avoidance might need a bit more time and a bit more space to work up to that, and they might never want a relationship that's as intense as an anxious might. An avoidant might want a relationship with someone who's a little bit busier. Like, I'm gonna be honest, I sway avoidant. And I personally feel more comfortable when I'm with someone who, this is kind of to do with my attachment style, but it's also just like preference in people. I feel more comfortable when someone's got their own, jobs and hobbies and friends, and they've got their own shit going on, so I don't feel like they're literally leaning on me. I think that's slightly linked to my attachment, because I find that overwhelming as fuck, but it's also just unattractive to me on a different level, where I'm like, why haven't you got anything going on? And this is what I mean, like, there's a million factors. That could be just purely like, I just don't like, as an adult, I don't really want to date someone that's too chill about everything, and like, I'm just gonna go for a drink with my friends, and who fucking get, like, I'm like, I want you to have a full-time job and like come home at 5 o'clock and I don't need to talk to you until after work. Bye, have a nice day. Like, I don't need to be in constant contact with people. I don't need to do everything with my boyfriend. I don't have a boyfriend, but if I did, I'm very much like, I love to feel like you're two individuals, but again, like, I just think that's healthy. But a lot of it is preference. Someone else might be like, I want a partner that I'm gonna do absolutely everything with, and that's also fine. Like, do what you want. But unfortunately for us all, the anxious and the avoidance tend to be drawn to each other and end up dating. Like, quite often a couple will be an anxious avoidant kind of dynamic. And, you know, you can see how this would be shit in a lot of ways, because it's one person who, you know, wants to ask what you're having for lunch and who you're talking to and how your days are going and what you're thinking about and everything all the time. And then you've got someone else who quite literally wants you to fuck off. Like, it kind of creates that cat and mouse dynamic where someone is always the kind of chaser and someone's always being chased, and it's kind of like neither of you are really getting what you want. And also, like, if you are anxiously attached, dating an avoidant will quite literally trigger every single trigger you have, because you're, like I said at the start, your kind of deep-rooted fear, I guess, is that you're going to be abandoned and that someone's going to leave you or whatever. You date an avoidant who is quite distant, maybe, is a little bit cold, is a little bit at arm's length. You know, of course you're going to think they're going to leave you, because, like, that's already what you're thinking. And, you know, as much as the avoidant person that you're dating might have no intention of leaving you at all, the fact that they're a little bit more distant and you can't handle space very well, it's kind of like a fucking mess. And then you're going to get stressed and you're going to get anxious and you're going to kind of try and claw them back. And then they're going to be like, oh my fucking God, you're too much. I'm just trying to live my life, you know. This is a very common dynamic though, because we generally don't pick someone that's going to challenge our current beliefs and kind of narratives that we have. We tend to pick something that feels predictable and familiar, and it kind of, I don't know, like, our brains don't like to be wrong. It will kind of form a narrative and it will just consistently pick things that reinforce that that's true. Hence why almost everyone, like, has a dating pattern where they end up in the same kind of things, because we pick things that we've seen play out before, because it's like, well, I know how this is going to go. It's not scary to me. I know what's going to happen. Like, for example, if your fear is relationships, you know, are overwhelming, they're too much, they fuck with my independence, I don't like it. Unfortunately, if that's the narrative that you carry, then you are going to date people that are quite overwhelming and intense, just because it's proving to you that, like, yep, I knew it. This is what I thought relationships were like, and now I'm trying it, and it's exactly what I thought. You know, you're going to go for what you already, like, you're almost manifesting what you're scared of to happen. Hence why if someone, you know, enters a healthy, safe, stable relationship, and that's not what they're used to, quite often they don't fucking like it and they're uncomfortable and they'll sabotage it themselves, because not because it's not maybe what they want at the end of the day, it probably is, but it's like it's challenging their brain too much, where it's like, I don't know what this is, I don't know how it's going to play out, this is unfamiliar, I'm just going to fucking ruin it. Do you know what I mean? Our brains are quite often not on our side. Even if the narrative we have is not in our favor at all, it will continue to tell you the same things, and you kind of have to override it. And that's not easy. Like, you kind of have to be like, this is uncomfortable, but this is kind of long-term what I want, so I'm going to push through. And another reason that anxious and avoidance often end up together is, imagine an avoidant and an avoidant together. The relationship just, like, there's no glue. Like, no one will, neither of them are that fucking fussed about talking. No one's, like, they're both just, it's gonna fall apart. There's no glue. Whereas an anxious and an anxious, you're both gonna, like, lose your minds. Anxiously attached people are important in a way of, like, they're often the glue in a relationship. And, you know, it can be healthy. You can have, like, a healthy kind of dynamic with it, but it's like to an extent. But yeah, I would say that these two attachment styles are kind of as unhealthy as each other. I don't think either are better. I do think avoidants are quite often painted very poorly. Also, the book Attached, if you're interested in attachment styles, that's like the book to read. Like, it's a really interesting book, but in that book, avoidants are painted so badly. Like, they kind of have this reputation of, like, just being people that will, like, fuck with your head and say they want one thing, but then they want something else, and then they're, like, always emotionally unavailable and shit. And as much as quite often those things might be true, like, that might be behaviors that an avoidant would display, I think they're both as unhealthy and insecure as each other, just in different fucking ways. That's my opinion. Because, you know, dating an anxious person, not a walk in the park either. Like, dating someone who kind of defaults to thinking the worst all the time and that never really trusts you and kind of lets you flourish as your own individual person a lot of the time because they're kind of too jealous, you know, due to their own insecurities. It can feel like that. It can feel quite suffocating. And like I said, I do sway more avoidant and I have dated people that sway more anxious. So from my experience, like, it's not the easiest thing in the world to date someone who's anxiously attached either. I'm sure it's not a walk in the park to date me either, don't get me wrong. But I just wanted to stand up for avoidance for a second because I have definitely experienced it where it just feels like your partner isn't really encouraging you to, you know, go and flourish as your own person. Like I said, it's kind of like there's always a sense of like, but where am I in that? But what am I doing? And it's like, fucking hell, like, let me breathe, you know? But basically both of these attachments are insecure attachments. The only supposed healthy attachment is the secure attachment, securely attached. Supposedly this is the most common one. I fucking beg to differ, but secure attachment will show up as someone who's comfortable with being close and emotionally intimate with someone, but someone that's also comfortable with space and, you know, you being your own individuals with your own lives. You know, they'll be emotionally available and just kind of have like a level head on their shoulders about the relationship. You know, relationships don't particularly trigger them either which way. They're kind of just, they can make sense of things and they can be emotionally supportive and not get super like, obviously everyone has triggers. No one is easy to date. No one is fucking easy to date, but someone securely attached will generally be easier to date because they can kind of just like, they're a bit more clear-headed about the whole thing. And these people tend to have either had a healthy childhood, you know, all-around good situation with their parents. Again, does that even exist? I feel like everyone's got some fucking trauma from their childhood. I don't know. But more like emotionally available parents, or they could have also had like a shitty childhood, but they've sorted it out themselves. They've worked through it themselves. They might just be securely attached, or they might have gone from an insecure attachment to a secure attachment, which is not easy, but you can do that. Like you should aim to do that. And dating someone who is securely attached will rub off on you as well. That's kind of one way to make your attachment style a bit healthier, is date someone who's got like a healthy attachment, because they're demonstrating to you what a healthier kind of love might look like, and they're not feeding into that shitty, unhealthy dynamic. They'll kind of shut that down, and if you adjust to being with them, it will kind of level you out a little bit. And the fourth and final attachment style is disorganized attachment, which is fearful, dismissive. It's both. This one's very, very, very rare. I think it's like, what, 2% of people are this or something. But it's if you've had like a really traumatic, turbulent, confusing childhood, where you're kind of a blend of the anxious and the avoidant. You know, those two at the start that completely contradicted each other. You're kind of both, where you crave that closeness and you want it, and one day maybe you're really like that, and maybe the next day you're like, this is too much, I can't fucking do it. And you're kind of in this inner turmoil all the time of, you're never really fully comfortable, because even though you want one thing, you can't do it, and then you want the other thing, and then you feel uncomfortable. And I imagine this is fucking horrible to be in. And I think it, to me, sounds a little bit like the avoidant attachment style, in the sense of it's like you want one thing but you're not comfortable necessarily in it. But it's kind of like the avoidant on crack mixed with the anxious. It's just like, it comes from quite a lot of trauma, hence why it's not super common. But you know, it could be your attachment style. I don't fucking know. You just like go to therapy if you want to know your attachment style. You can do a quiz online that is matched with the book Attached, which is pretty decent. Also, like, ask someone, if there's someone close to you that knows about attachment styles, ask them what they think you are, and they could probably fucking tell you, because like I said, once you kind of understand them, I, like, all of my friends, I could like tell you exactly what they are, and I'm not even dating them, but people just, they tend to be the same way in relationships that they are in friendships, you know? Like, you know, some friends are really needy and that message you all the time, and some friends, like, you see them like every now and then and you can kind of tell that's enough. Like, it's kind of, there's signs and behaviors, but like I said, none is necessarily that bad. Like, they're all kind of fucking unhealthy other than secure. So don't stress if like you get one of them, you know, that you didn't want. Like I said at the start, I think one of the main benefits from understanding the attachments, so there's anxious, avoidant, secure, disorganized, is that it kind of debunks the kind of like facade. I don't know, it kind of lets you see through people a little bit, not completely, like obviously there's fucking tons of like people are very nuanced, but it lets you see through some things and also call yourself out. You can notice from yourself and the reactions and responses and the behaviors you have, you can kind of look at yourself and be like, you're just being fucking avoidant. Like, what have they actually done? You know, it gives you that kind of ability to question, is this thing actually happening? Not like that you're fucking like insane and making stuff up, but like, do I need to respond in this way, or is my attachment trigger like flaring up, and maybe I can like self-soothe a little bit, maybe take some time, maybe there's some certain thing you can do that can kind of level you back out again. It's different for everyone. You know, it gives you that kind of distance and perspective where not only is this going to be healthier for you and you're gonna be a little bit more in control of the things you say and do, which is always like an enjoyable feeling, but also your partner, like the difference between dating someone who's kind of self-aware about things like this and can kind of call themselves out and acknowledge and kind of critique their own behavior and learn how to not be a dick. Do you know what I mean? Like, some people like have no idea what they're doing, why they're doing it, and they just say shit and then they're like, I don't know why I do it. That's not fun to fucking date. Like, to be in a relationship with someone who's got that self-awareness and that understanding of themselves to an extent, obviously we're always going to be learning. Oh my god, it's raining. But to have that, and where they can kind of learn from their mistakes and kind of, I don't know, be able to take a beat and think before they speak is excellent. You know, like if you're dating someone who gets that kind of anxious knee-jerk reaction, like when you go out or something, I don't know, but someone that can like breathe and then be like, have a nice time. I don't know, like that's a small example, but I just think people who have that kind of self-awareness and can fucking check themselves and be like, what has this person actually done, or am I being shitty, is such a necessary and attractive trait, because people that don't think about things like that are people that they say sorry and then they do the same shit, and then they say sorry and then they do the same shit, and it's fucking exhausting and no one wants to be with you. No one wants to be with someone who hasn't got a self-awareness of how they're fucking acting, okay? And attachment is important, and I feel like you should always be working on yourself and trying to be better as a person and as a partner and as a friend. And like, you know, the more you're aware of this shit, the healthier relationships you're gonna have. Like, I think understanding your attachment gives you levity over the situation so that you can control how you want to act, how you want to show up, the behaviors you want to do, so you don't just bulldoze all over the relationship, end up being really shitty to someone. Obviously we're all going to do it occasionally, we're not going to be acting in our best form, but you can control what you say and how you act a lot of the time, and that's what we're striving for. Do you know what I mean? But your attachment style massively affects how you function in a relationship and what is going to freak you out about relationships, essentially. And I think from a more selfish perspective, understanding your own triggers and what's going to freak you out allows you to kind of predict your own behavior and kind of know what you're walking into and what to expect, so that you're not walking into it being like, why am I so jealous? What's going on? Like, you can be like, okay, this is like, I knew this was going to happen. It allows you to start to predict your patterns and understand what your typical behavior is, so it doesn't surprise you or freak you out anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have that distance from it. Like, for example, like I sway more avoidant. I now know if I'm ever romantically involved with anyone, they can pretty much do fucking nothing and I'll be like, oh my god, it's too much, it's fucking suffocating me. But I can handle it without actually, like, maybe that's my knee-jerk response, and like, you know, without even, like, my subconscious is like, we need to leave. I can fully now acknowledge that and ignore it and be like, look, actually I quite like this person, they haven't fucking done anything, I'm gonna thank you, I'm gonna fucking ignore that. Cheers for telling me that I'm unsafe, but I'm actually not. You know what I mean? You can kind of work through it, and then it doesn't freak me out if I was talking to someone and I had that kind of, oh my god, it doesn't freak me out at all, because I'm like, well, obviously, Brooke, like, you always fucking feel like that. Whereas before, if I didn't have this awareness of myself, I would just be like, this is a gut feeling that I need to leave. Do you know what I mean? And I'd fucking leave. And you know, like I said, like, avoidance is quite a spectrum. But like, a lot of people that are avoidantly attached that don't kind of have that awareness that they're avoidant, because also avoidance a lot of the time aren't going to be the types of people reading books like Attached and things if they're really avoidant, because they're too avoidant to fucking think about it. So you kind of have to hit a point where you're not like that far down the spectrum. You can start to like acknowledge it, if that made any sense. But like I said, kind of a typical behavior of avoidance, if you're very avoidant, is you just like one red flag and you're gone, one red flag and you're gone. You can never actually like let anything, like, try anything properly, like try a relationship out. You know, to me that's also a sign that you haven't kind of got that familiarity with your own patterns and behaviors yet. Otherwise, like I said, you'd be able to be like, look, have you ever dated someone and not felt like this? No. I'm starting to think it's fucking me problem and not them. Like, let's work on it, you know? You know, like, I'm not gonna let my anxieties run my relationships and like dating life. Otherwise, I'm never gonna get what I want. Like, you have to kind of at some point be brave and be like, this is fucking terrifying, but I'm gonna try it. That's essentially what like love is anyway. I feel like relationships are scary. Whatever your attachment, it's very vulnerable and it's very daunting to be that close to someone, whether you're avoidant or not, like, you know. And I think for me, a huge way that it's helped as an avoidant is like I said, it kind of, a part of it is that you feel like partners are threatening your independence, and I felt like that a lot. And I think for me, realizing that I'm the one in control of my life and my independence and my time and how much power I give someone over me, I'm the one in the driver's seat of that. It's not like I start dating someone and they have a say in how independent I am. If I want to do my own thing, that's my fucking choice. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not like you start dating someone and they can actually dictate how you behave or how independent you are or how many hobbies you're gonna, like, for me, it's helped in the way of, I'm like, okay, you just need to work on you, on a life that makes you happy, and just carry on doing that whether you're with someone or not, you know? Like, I think I'd date someone and I'd kind of drop that a little bit, and then I'd blame my partner in my head. I don't know if I fucking ever said it, probably, but like, I'd be like, it's definitely the relationship because it's making me less independent. When it's like, no, actually, they can't make you less independent. Only you can do that. That's your fault. Do you know what I mean? So I think for me, it's helped because it just makes me feel a lot more in control, where I'm like, relationships don't need to be that scary if you realize that, like, whether you're with someone or not, you have that autonomy over what you want to do with your life, you know? But I think if you don't know your triggers, you know, you're kind of walking into a relationship blindly, and I think they're already daunting enough. You don't want to walk into it with no awareness of yourself at all. But yeah, like, I definitely, like I said, I feel like attachment theory and styles have become very popular, like a point of interest with a lot of people, which is quite interesting. But I do think one negative way people use it is they use it as kind of like an excuse and kind of like a fun little label of, like, they'll do the quiz and then they'll be like, I'm an avoidant, and then it's like they blame everything on that, and they're like, then they're acting in avoidant ways, and then they'll just be like, oh, I'm just like, it's just because I'm like a naive little avoidant girl. You know what I mean? Like, it's that vibe where it's like, you're not meant to like find that out and then just do fuck all about it. Like, the point is, it's telling you this is your default kind of insecure behaviors, and the point is to work it out, to do something about it. You know, obviously you're gonna act in avoidant ways, and like that, you know, you're not gonna be perfect the second you find out what your attachment is. But I don't know, I've seen people kind of use it as like a funny little label, and I'm kind of like you can't date someone or get really involved with someone and then just fuck off and be like, sorry, I'm just like I really struggle with avoidant attachment. And it's like, Right? It's your fucking problem. Like, people have feelings. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. I think that's a way I've seen it be a negative thing, where people just kind of find it fun to find out what they are, and then it's just like, oh, that's something I can like blame everything on, and you're acting just as shitty as you were before. Do you know what I mean? I do think though, if you're in a relationship or you're dating someone or whatever, having an awareness of yours and your partner's attachment allows you to be more empathetic towards each other, rather than being like, why are they fucking acting like this? Do you know what I mean? You can kind of have that empathy towards each other. Obviously, again, it's not an excuse. It's not like, oh, that's just who they are. But you can kind of like have that compassion of like, I don't know, towards them. And that, you know, you're not trying to be a bitch. You're actually afraid of something, and like, we can work on that together. That then puts you in a position of like, okay, we can work as a team. I think it helps with that. And also, you can then set appropriate boundaries, which is huge. If you understand where each other are coming from, the boundaries can be set to make you more comfortable. You know, for example, if someone is more anxiously attached, then maybe something like being like, okay, if I'm coming home from work late, I'll text you and I'll let you know. I won't just fucking be late, because I know that will trigger you. You know, a little text where it's just like, now they're getting less triggered. Their attachment's going to flare up less. You'll probably get along better. There'll be less arguments. Oh my god, it's raining again. It's basically just ways you can make it a smoother ride, help each other feel the most seen and heard and things. The main thing to remember basically is that it's malleable. You can move towards a healthier attachment by being compassionate with yourself. Okay, it is fucking raining and you probably can't hear me, so I'm going to end this episode. I've also been talking for ages anyway. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I will probably do a part 2. Let me know if you want it, and I will talk to you next week.